Metatalks is produced using binaural recording technology, which means it's highly recommended that you listen to the podcast with a headset on rather than your speakers so that you can get the full effect of a binaural recording that gives you further depth of space and brings you further into our conversation. And with that, welcome to the show. Oh, it's 19th and 20th?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. No, actually, we're on the same day right now. No. Yeah, we are. No.
Oh, no.
We'll be on the same day in 4 minutes, so we gotta hurry this up so we can be on the separate days. Okay. Spanning time zones and oceans from Austin to the Isle of Wight, Metatalks continues with Alachi and Jeppy. Today's date is March 19th for me and March 20th for Jeppy, 2010. This is episode 3, Meta Layers. And Meta Layers is a topic regarding how we fracture our identities online and the reasons why. And, you know, all the reasons why we separate and create these portals and different degrees of who we are. And it was a requested topic, actually, because a lot of people are new to trying out expanding their lives in the metaverse. And they're running into a lot of issues regarding how much of themselves they put online and the problems that come up when you try to merge your real life with any sort of pseudo identity you create. So,
were you going to mention who suggested?
Well, it was Phoenix who came into the Metatalks Blind Point channel, and he was like, "Well, do you have a topic for next week?" And I was like, "We do actually. We had one planned." He was like, "Well, I was hoping you could talk about how to handle when you put yourself online. What are these things that you need to do, and how do you organize everything out, and how do you express yourself, and yet be honest, and yet guarded?" And it's something I've come across where when I first started and I used a lot of my real life identity, but I merged it with Alachia. And when I created Wildcast, I didn't want any part of my personality and my characteristics to come across before I was able to present what I wanted to present on Wildcast, which was a World of Warcraft podcast. So I didn't want, say, my political views, my views on sexuality, my views on how you should paint your room. I didn't want that stuff to interfere with what I presented. I wanted what I presented to be the thing that mattered the most. So I killed, that other blog, that other homepage, the whole thing, the whole life sharing I did from, I guess it was 1997 all the way through 2005, I guess it was. I just deleted it. I purged it, and I made sure no one could get to, to the best of my ability, so no one could get to it. And I could start fresh. I could be Alachia, the Wildcast podcaster. Well,
it's fair to say you had a huge footprint on the internet, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. Well, I mean, not huge as in like no one knew me, but my digital footprint was there. I was pretty obscure, but the amount of stuff I put about myself up there was pretty extensive. And I blogged, so much, or I didn't call it blogging, but journaling. I journaled from 97 all the way to 2005, and I had, I was down to the things where it was I would tell people exactly what I was eating, or not people, but I would tell the online metaverse, hey, I'm eating this today, and this is what happened while I was eating, and I'd have my big shtick was the crap, my clumsiness would, the mishaps of my eating things would have, where I would spill something or knock something down, and that was one of my more exciting episodes within my journal. But I would talk about my work. I would talk about my friends, and I would have a lot of things to say about my view of society, and that was pretty negative, actually. And I was really afraid that people, within the WoW community were very positive, optimistic people who just didn't really want to listen to a girl who had that many negative thoughts. So I kind of killed the negative side of me, and and then I stayed with the positive. Well, as I started to realize that my podcast wasn't just about WoW anymore, that I wanted to talk about meta, so I brought in a lot of the meta and applied it to WoW, because I still think WoW is probably one of the best social media networking online virtual worlds there is. And I felt like, well, there's more aspects to me than just a shaman or a druid. And I had been on such a sabbatical when I did WoWcast for so many years that I didn't share any part of my life. I didn't touch a camera. I used to take pictures of everything. I didn't touch a camera that entire time. I hardly took any pictures. I journaled, but I journaled sort of privately on my own, not released online. And I realized I really missed doing that, because for me it's very cathartic to not just live in my head, but to throw my head out into the void. And it doesn't even matter to me if anybody read it or responded to it. I was just leaving my digital footprint, and that was very satisfying to me. And
there would seem to be a part. I sort of came into your area of your sphere of influence when you seem to be going through that change back.
Yes.
Where
Yes, you
were
did.
Still very reserved and very, and as you say, focused, say, on WoWcast. Do you think that the fact that you wanted to get this out of other people, I think that seems to be that's how it appeared to me anyway, that you wanted to be able to get this sort of openness out from other people, but in order to be able to do that, not only you would have to open yourself up a bit more again, and also when you saw other people being open, I know there was projects such as the 365 and other various bits and pieces where people were being encouraged to share, that you saw these people sharing, you think, oh well, did you just suddenly yearn to share as well?
Well, I definitely wanted to be more than Alachia the WoWcast podcaster. So that was the thing when I was talking to people and I wanted to have a conversation. And when I realized that that whole podcast was about opening up a conversation and wanting to reach out to the people and to not just hear my own voice in my head. And, with the way BindPoint afforded me to be able to meet people at, their leisure to come in. And they were very inspiring. I remember it was a time where I hardly ever slept. I slept 4 hours out of every day because I couldn't wait to get back online and meet these people. And we would do really exciting projects like the 365 photo project. And when we started, I did it on the side for myself. But then I realized, none of these people, I couldn't share that. I couldn't share my photos with anyone because I wanted to stay purely meta. And, I feel like I still want to stay purely meta for the most part to the general public, because for me, having your photo out there is just, you completely are objectified immediately. I mean, as a female especially, it's just like, as soon as you put an image to a voice or a personality, I don't care how open or how liberal you are with anything, you're going to immediately start to go hot, not hot, ugly, fugly, fat, stupid, I can't stand the judging of that stuff, and then you become just that. You become that again. You become just a girl or just, a female, and I worked so hard to put, myself out there characteristically and put myself in. I really wanted to see, honestly, if I could just do it, if I could be purely meta, and that would be significant enough for people to grasp that I was I had a strong character behind myself. And it worked. So for me, sharing my photos becomes a personal thing now, where I feel like I have a personal interest in that person. Then I'll start to share, my photo, because then I want to have a real life connection with them. And with the people in BindPoint, especially because they were sharing their photos with me, I felt like I wanted to share back. And so that's why I started to open up the privacy settings to allow them to see my 365s as well. Because that's the other thing with the whole photo projects. You know, when you do things like that, in order for you to keep the momentum going for any project, the collaboration has to work in multiple ways, right? You know, you have to contribute too. And you know, when I wasn't contributing, it was kind of harder for me to go like, "Hey, man, where's your 365 photo?" And you know, I put mine up. Why don't you put yours up? And you know, you show me yours, and I'll show you mine. And it's turned out to work a lot. It works a lot better with the Daily Post-it Flickr group, because we're not beholden to show pictures of ourselves, because you know, at times we get really self-conscious, and you get sick of seeing yourself too. So yeah, I try to keep up with it as best I can, but you know, I'm approaching May is when we started it, and I think I only have 180 something, so I'm well behind. But
probably one of the people who've done the most of them. Yeah, I think you're right. The daily poster is because it can be anything. You know, it can be anything that you have to a photo of or an image of. You know, I think that's fantastic. And also, in some ways, it can show even more about the person.
Exactly.
The picture themselves. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. To turn the camera away from the person and look to see what they're seeing. It's a lot. I've found it's a lot more telling than just seeing the person's face. Although I like seeing their faces every day, and I don't know why, because it's like we don't, as we interface in the meta, especially as you become more personal with the people, and I feel like they're kind of like just sort of like home to me, like a commune. That sounds bad, but like a commune of really cool people. I just like, even if I don't interact with them on a daily basis anymore, I just like to know that they're there. You know, it's sort of like having a family in your living room, but you don't necessarily always talk to them. To see their faces every day was like the second way, you know, sort of like a second degree in which I can at least experience them, you know, like, and having their face was like, oh, well, you know, that's what they look like today, and I don't get to see their faces at all, so it's just, I don't know, it was a supplement. But again, it's really hard to encourage people to do one every day. It's very difficult.
Yeah. I mean, it's fair to say that I failed on that one.
Yeah.
Big time.
I think you did 3? 4?
3? I did more than 3. I did like 8 or 9. But most of them I was hiding behind stuff.
Yeah, or you manipulated the photo.
Oh, that was actually me, and I just had some work done after we got involved in all that kind of thing. The thing I really liked, and another project that you started off, was the desktop videos, where people would go, they'd basically show everything they had on their desktop and go through it and maybe have a little bit of a story behind what the items were, because that said a lot about people. And that was really good.
Yeah. I mean, collaboration projects just get me going like nothing else. I live for collaboration, and especially when people are just as interested as you are in collaborating. I mean, that is just that moment of connection. Oh wow, it's so powerful, and you're just like, yeah, you know, like we're connecting, we're sharing, and it's awesome. And it's quite difficult to find, you know, a lot of moments to connect in the meta, because the tools just aren't there. They're very limited. I mean, you cannot possibly tell me people actually connect with each other with Facebook and Twitter, and you know, the biggest social networking site is Facebook. And I mean, I'm sorry, playing Farmville with someone, I just don't. That's not really connecting, in my opinion. And chatting is fine and it's good, but you know, a lot of it is just sort of casting out, and it's a very valid way of connecting, but there's just a degree of which it's not I mean, you can chat with everyone pretty easily, but until you actually collaborate, you get to delve deeper into their minds when you collaborate with them, because first you found something they have a vested interest in, and second, you know, you get to see a part of them that's not just responding to a couple questions, or you know, making a commentary about a YouTube video, or you know, talking about their day, you know, in a very sort of diary fashion. it's how they think, how they imagine things, how they create, and it's just really fun. And you don't really necessarily think people are going to do it, and then they do, and you're like, that's awesome.
Yeah. I remember when there were a few people who weren't so sure about it, and then it was a week or so, 2 weeks maybe, and then bang, there was a couple, and then you're like, whoa. And occasionally what would happen is that somebody would say, no, I'm not doing it, no, not doing it. And they'd do something, and then there'd be a flood of them. This one person would suddenly go, whoa, that was great, I really enjoyed the buzz from sharing that. And then next thing you know, you're wading through the stuff.
Yes. I'm a little obsessive. I check Flickr like every 30 minutes. Probably actually probably more like every 13 minutes, but I'll say 30 minutes so I sound cooler.
I know what's funny is because people will say, oh, I'm going to upload a video, or I'm about to upload a load of photos, and you're like, oh, cool. And then you'll be, a few minutes later, you'll be like, I checked, they're not there yet. Hello? Where are they? Where's the video? These people are trying to get it done, and you're, I just did it again, I refreshed, nothing there.
But
I appreciate this is completely off topic, by the way.
Yeah, yes. I kind of... So back to topic. So he was asking, like you create how do you start, because he had an issue where someone in his real life, I guess, found his blog and made a comment about it and didn't appreciate that he put it on there and he had to take it down. And so he was like, well, I guess I'm not doing this way. And and the reason I went back to myself was that I had this exact same experience where I was doing these things and I thought perfectly normal to share these things, and it's not. When you're talking about people you're interfacing with in the real world, in real life, out of respect to them, I have found you just cannot do it using your real life identity. It's like a violation of their trust, and they hate it. And obviously, it'll get you into trouble too. Like that old news article about the woman who got fired because she said she was bored on Facebook at her job. And it's just like that too with the personal stuff you put on your blog, or even pictures. Even pictures that you post without getting permission. If you do it with your real life tag, it's a lot different than if you do it with a meta tag, because the meta tag it has a sort of sense of anonymity, and you can't really pinpoint exactly who you're talking about or anything like that, and it gives them privacy without you pulling back on any of the content. And in fact, another person who joined our Flickr group, she was saying how she read something I posted in my blog, and how she really wanted to be able to express some of the things that I expressed, but she couldn't, because out of respect for some people in her real life who didn't want her talking about certain things on the public blog that she has, that she held back, she didn't do it. And I was like, I responded saying, like, if you can't produce something with the identity that you currently are producing with, don't let that stop you from doing it. Because it is so easy to create another identity. It is so, and one that you can even relate to yourself, like, that's an offshoot of your name, or something to do with like the genre of which your meta identity represents. And eventually you can just create, I mean bloggers are so easy to create, and as well as Flickr accounts and everything. If you can't express yourself with one identity, I have not found an issue with creating another one. And as you get to know more people, as you become more comfortable with them, you can start to share those other little filters and layers and branches with those people. And it's just a lot of it is just out of respect for the people around you in your real life. And even if it's not in your real life, then it's out of respect for the people who are really close to you in the meta, that their comfort level. Like, you must know, like, most people have enough self-awareness to know that you can't just say everything you want about a person and it not affect them. It's going to affect them. We're human beings. So whenever you create a meta identity, I would highly recommend you don't use your real name in it. Highly, highly recommend. It has nothing to do with your real name. Because you'll have the freedom of expression that you can't have when you have, when you're using your real name, where you can't say, my boss is a real dickhead today. because you're Sally Smith and you're easily Googleable, and your boss can see that you call them a dickhead, or your coworker can see, and it's very easy to get linked back with identities, because even with by association, that's why I tend to cut anybody who knows me in real life. I tend to cut them off my meta, and vice versa, because I don't even want people to find me through linkage. So create a new identity. Just create one that's not tied to your real life. And if people in your real life do know about your meta identity, and you don't feel like you can fully express who you are, just create another one and start posting to that and expressing yourself, because there's nothing worse to me than thinking that you're stifling the creation of something because you're afraid that someone will find it and someone won't appreciate it or someone won't like it, because that was supposed to be the whole beauty of the metaverse, is that as pioneers of the metaverse, we get to continually create non-stop data. We are just constantly creating, and to say we shouldn't create because so-and-so is not going to be upset. Well, guess what? That's the beauty of the metaverse. You can be anyone or anything, and they don't have to know about it, and fucking put it out there. It kills me to think that people aren't putting something out there, even if it's just one single solitary thought out there that they could create and put out there in the metaverse, and they don't, because they're afraid of the consequences. I mean, that's so depressing to me, because it's so easy, right?
It's certainly easy to create an identity. As you say, if you did it from the very beginning, obviously you may not have these problems anyway. People would not be aware that you had a blog, or even those things happening outside of your real life. But I suppose you're also talking to those people that have attempted to share via blog, or via Twitter even, or via any of the other social networking mediums, and then have suddenly thought to themselves, I want to express more, but I'm being held back by my real life, people who will be able to, who have expressed an interest in looking at this blog, because therefore I'm basically constantly thinking about what will they think, what will the people who read this think, as opposed to, like you say, that ultimate freedom of just being able to say what you want to say without necessarily worrying about any sort of consequences of that, because the only consequence is the people are thinking, well, the meta identity feels this way, and at the end of the day, what does that matter to you if they're not connected to your real life?
Yeah, and we come from a real life social construct, so of course we're going to always feel reserved. But even for me, as I have a blog where I can sort of just say what has happened in my life, and talk about some stuff that's going on, and even then I still feel like self-conscious when I think I know people are reading it. So then I have to have yet another identity where I can post a blog where I'm just like, I can just say something and not think in the back of my head like, oh God, what are people going to think when I say this, and then I throw it out there, and then sometimes I'll import it into the more public blog, because I look back and read, and I'm like, okay, I shouldn't have been that self-conscious about what I just said. But sometimes I have to leave it where it is, where it's just a digital footprint somewhere that's completely anonymous, and I was able to sort of just express myself, and and as people get to know me better or whatever, maybe I'll feel like I could share the deeper aspects of certain things, and it's not like I'm saying stuff like that's uber secret or anything like that. It's just sort of like how much of your emotion and how much raw exposure you want people to have to how vulnerable you are as a human being, and how not together you are. And sometimes it's hard to show that to people, and you don't want to show them that, and you don't want to be judged. It's really rough, and when you put yourself out there, you're being judged, and that's why it's difficult to get people kind of dragging people along, like, come on, come out, just come out of your shell, and expose your layers. I want to see all of the layers. In real life, you say that to people, and then they show them to you, all the layers, and you're like, whoa, dude, no, you're fucked up, so, and it applies in the meta too, where people are like, no, we're totally open and honest, and let's just come all out. But you don't see that. I mean, like, I've hardly ever seen that where people choose one identity, and you know, it's when people say, you know, you should just be honest all the time. What's the problem? You know, you got to look and see, like, how many people have you ever seen use one identity online, and that represents them through and through? I've met like not even one person. No, because he uses a secondary identity. Yeah. No, I've never met anyone who is exactly who they said they were in every aspect of the meta. I've never met anyone like that. So they always have a pseudonym. Their blog is different than their Facebook page, their Twitter versus, you know, their Flickr, and it's just completely, you know, and they don't use their real name, and yeah, it's not that easy to be full on, here's me, take me for what I am, because you're very self-conscious of how you're perceived.
So the other end of that, of course, is those people who would say that they're out there and that they only, you know, just this is the truth, and you can handle it or you can't handle it. This is the truth. But then occasionally I've looked at those types of people, or the blogs that those people do, and I thought to myself, you're performing to an audience. You know, there's not. You are aware of the audience. You are sculpting the things you say, and you know, producing stuff which is geared at a reader. This is not you expressing all your emotions. This is you performing. You know, it becomes a broadcast, and I think that's equally as dangerous as not expressing anything. Where you have the one side of these people who will curtail what they say for fear of affecting their real life, and then those other people who will amplify what they say in order to big up their meta life.
And I also think it's just dangerous to give people the impression that you got to be completely open and honest, and everyone's going to just accept you for who you are, or they're not, because we all have degrees of acceptance, you know, except for me. Where I accept, because of the barbecue, which is part of a different conversation, I am very unshockable. But I feel, no, and that's a lie too, I do have my thresholds. But when people say that you can be completely honest, it is to a degree, because we all have levels of comfort, we have all levels of connection, and sometimes you can connect with someone completely, and sometimes you can only connect on certain levels, and that's, you know, that applies in real life too, where you have degrees of where you feel familiar enough to expose certain parts of your life, but you know, one they're either not going to be interested in the other part, or two, they won't understand. And it's just like when you do, you know, we're talking about blogging specifically, but this can apply to podcasting, or what pictures you decide to post, or how you decide to express yourself in the metaverse. There are consequences. Like there's, let's take for example Fate. Fate's in our Bind Point channel. He's one of those guys who's just brutally honest. I mean, brutally honest to a degree where it's almost shockable. And he's a self-proclaimed asshole, and that's just who he is. I find it refreshing. I like it a lot, and I can handle his humor. But he has turned a lot of people away from him because of that, where he made, you know, during 9/11 on Twitter, he made a couple of like jokes that went way below the political, you know, like
in the anniversary.
Yeah. And a lot of the people in Bind Point, you know, who were like, you know, all about sharing and honesty and being completely true to yourself, were like, I'm not talking to you anymore. You know, we are shunning you because you were such an asshole on Twitter about 9/11. So it's sort of like, there is, yes, you can say, yes, I will accept you for everything, but you're going to find that there are thresholds for yourself where you're not going to be able to accept certain things that people say because it's just too offensive, or you just don't get it. And people are aware of that, and they should be aware of that, because you don't want to alienate people by being completely yourself and saying, you know, look, this is me, if it offends you, fuck you. You can't, I don't think you can do that. I think that's very, it'd be like saying that the metaverse had no social rules either, and they do.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? This is the problem that I think people are facing, is that if you consider that there are two realities, your real life, and somebody gave a fantastic term for it. What did they call it? the meatverse.
Meatverse.
We called it the meatverse. Was that Semiticus?
Yeah, but it was a typo.
Oh, was it? But
Yeah.
what a perfect example.
Yeah.
The meatverse as opposed to the metaverse. So you've got these two separate places, and it's almost like one of them is controlled and buttoned down, and you have responsibilities, and the things you say have consequences, and they can affect your bread and butter. This poor lady in the Daily Telegraph article we talked about earlier, who said that she was bored at her job, lost her job. You know, that was a pretty tough consequence for a throwaway line on Facebook. However, you come on to the metaverse, and for some people that means no holds barred. It's the Wild West. I can say whatever the hell I feel like. You only have to go look at some YouTube comments to realise that is where anarchy lies, because unfortunately people, when you get down to the raw nitty-gritty, are pretty arsehole. You know, they're not, you know, people who are unfettered and don't have any social qualms are douches to a large extent, or they feel they can get away with it, so they do. You know, this is where all this. Well, I'm on the metaverse. I'm going to be completely truthful. I'm going to say what I feel. I'm going to, even go out my way to shock. You know, you have to have, as awful as it sounds, you do have to still follow a certain amount of social norm.
Well, that's the big difference between the metaverse and the meatverse, is that the meatverse has very little flexibility with the social constructs and rules of engagement. In the metaverse, there's still rules, but they're a little bit more varied, and as you find more different types of social groups or different types of outlets or portals, you can actually break a lot of those rules, where you just can't do that in the real world. It almost applies until you get down to the one-to-one level, that you have to mind things about how people will react to certain things. And I was talking to a guy, and he has two or three secret invite-only blogs, because he's tried before to sort of just say here's who I am, and it's disgusted people and turned them away and said they don't even want to understand it, because in the real world that you already have in your mind, anyone who thinks this way is exactly like this, or anyone who participates in certain things, they're fucked in the head, or they don't have a good scope of reality. But it's their niche. It's the things that they're into or they're interested in that other people just may not get, and it would be a shame for other people to see that, misinterpret it, not understand it, and then just completely ignore the person because they can't get another side of them. Because we don't all want to interface with people on every single level, 360 degrees of who a person is. I don't know very many people who are interested in the whole package. I mean the whole package. And there's just parts you love about a person and parts you don't like. And I don't think that. This
is like life has always been. I mean, we are talking about the separation between the metaverse and real life and the meatverse, which I'm going to use that all the time now.
Oh God, don't do it.
And all right, sorry, real life. But let me give you an example. When I was at school, sort of 15, 16 years old, I was quite good at rugby. I played for the school team, and I also played for the county under-16s team. And I had a group of friends who I played rugby with, and quite frankly, we were complete arseholes. Complete douches all the time. We belittled people. It was just the way this is. This is like a rugby thing. People who tend to play rugby tend to be a little bit obtuse. And it's a fact. That's the way it is. And I think a lot of times you'll find in lots of schools, say a sports team will be very cliquey, very anti people externally, that type of thing. I think most people would agree that is quite often the case. I also had a group of friends, because I was also, and not to blow my own horn, quite intellectual as well, and I was quite interested in education, and I was trying very hard to get a good education. I also had a group of friends that would hang around in the library, and they'd read books, and they'd talk about literature, and they would, this was the complete antithesis of the rugby group. And so I had to keep them separated. I could not, if you know, these two groups would have to remain separated in my life. I had a different personality when I was dealing with each one. Obviously, one was, you know, testosterone geared and very laddish and, you know, uncouth, and the other one was very opposite to that. Was, you know, was literate. If you see what I mean. So I split my identity in order to be able to deal with those two individual groups. Likewise, and I wouldn't want the rugby player team to necessarily, you know, cotton on to the intellectual side, and likewise I wouldn't want the opposite either. So it has always happened. I think we do split our personalities. I remember seeing a picture in a sociology book once it was a picture of a lady called Sally. It was made up for the book, and then around her were maybe 6 or 7 different pictures of her as a mother, as a wife, as a boss in the company she worked for, as a friend, you know, as a lover. You know, there's all these different pictures of her in different states, what, you know, depending on what she was wearing, what she was doing. And obviously she changed, her personality was all those. That was all of her, that was all her, but depending upon what environment and the group of people she was with, it would change, because she had, you know, she would adapt and change to meet those that environment. So it kind of always happens. It's just this is another place where we are.
It's because we're social creatures and we learn how to interact socially growing up, and we know how to behave in certain social situations. You know, like when I'm with family, I have a certain face on. If I'm in a workplace function, I have a certain, you know, attitude I have to try to, you know, maintain. And, you know, when I'm comfortable, I'm completely different, you know, and that I think represents really well the layers that we build up and we tear down in the metaverse to associate with ourselves, the identities that we choose to represent ourselves with. And some people have less layers and some people have more layers. And I don't see a problem with that. I think it's actually really good. And I think that people shouldn't be afraid to create as many layers as they need to fully represent themselves online. And if all of them can't intersect, I don't think that's an issue, and I don't think people should fear that they have multiple personalities online, or, you know, multiple identities online to represent themselves, because you can't be something for everyone. You know, you can only be certain things for certain people, and that's just the way it's always been, as, you know, as humans, how we interact. And I think, you know, when people say that we should be completely direct and people should know exactly who they're interfacing with, I'm not saying that that's not who we are. I mean, for every degree of interaction I have, I usually try to be completely honest about that interaction. And it's just that there's just certain levels of comfort I'm going to have with certain people where I feel like I could talk to them about something that I think they're going to relate to me about. One, not even just comfortable, but I know that they're interested in it. I'm not going to try to talk to someone about photography if they have no interest in taking pictures. I'm not going to talk to someone about podcasting or WoW if they hate gaming. You know, it's just sort of like the way we socialize is we kind of pick up on what people want to hear and what people like, and whether or not we can actually connect with them on certain levels. And I fear, like, you know, people are sort of like, you know, you gotta pick one idea, and I agree. It's really good to have one main representative of yourself online. You know, I've chosen Alachia, but that doesn't mean it's bad to have other, you know, fractured pieces of my Alachia identity out there that kind of represent me in different levels and different connections.
I think what the internet does and what Metaverse does is makes it that much easier to do. I think it's hard to split your life when it's in real life, when you because there's lots more overlap.
Right, and people will call you a liar.
There's lots more times. Yeah, exactly. So, but the fact that you're able, see, I think you're right in as much as the truthful part of it is that in each of your separations, the core is still you. That you haven't, say for instance, you're you have one part of your life, and we know people like this, who have one part of life who they all have a certain identity which is very much geared towards the work they do. They're in a tech business, they want to talk to people about tech, they want to be able to talk to people about operating systems and all the stuff that goes into user support and that type of thing. So they have one identity, and to that group of people, they're such and such, the tech guy. And to another group, but then they have another personality which is about gaming and about online life and more of the esoteric side of the internet, and so they have a separate personality. Now that individual is both those things. Within them are both those personalities, for want of a better word, both those identities. It just so happens that it's to the forefront, the business side is to the forefront in the business identity, and the gamer side is to the forefront in the gamer society, because they know that the communities they're dealing with are geared towards that. When you were talking earlier about somebody who, say, potentially would open themselves up and be like, oh my god, that's whatever they're talking about happens to be something that some people may find disgusting or perverse or whatever. The fact is that if they then went and faced a community where that is considered the norm, then they would be accepted that much easier, because obviously those people don't have the same preconceptions as those people that may find something to be abnormal.
Definitely, and especially because so much of the online world is professional now, like a lot of it's crossing over, it becomes extremely difficult to try to maintain any aspect of personal life online if you use your real life identity. I found that you can't embarrass your company. You're represented by your online personality from your company. Your colleagues can easily find you. And you kind of have to just maintain that persona of a good worker and, a solid individual, nothing deviant about you. You're straight-laced and, white picket fence material, because that's what's going to keep your job. That's what's going to keep that persona. That's the type of person who gets a promotion. The type of person who gets promotion isn't the guy who goes around dressing up as a bunny rabbit and having sex with other people who dress up as dogs or cats. It's just, you can't have a personal life really if you have a strong professional life online and use the same identity. I just don't. You'd have to have a pretty liberal job, I guess.
Obviously, if you work for a bunny rabbit company, but. This is why it's so strange, because obviously for countless years before there was an internet community, before there was an online life, all this would happen behind closed doors. An individual may have a very prestigious job and present one form of themselves to their employers and to their fellow employees, and then at night they'd go to some club, or there'd be a separation. They would have something that would go behind closed doors. And the reason that was able to happen is because it was behind closed doors. It was hidden. Unless you were party to those events, you would not know that this individual was doing whatever they were doing, which perhaps the company would not have approved of. The internet, on the other hand, and the search tools and the fact that you can, quickly find out what people are into, because they've used their real name in this example, makes that completely moot, because all of a sudden your boss is looking at the internet and finding that you're dressing up as a bunny. As you said, then that's where it becomes an issue. And that's why it's only because of the freedom the internet gives us to see all this information, to get hold of all this information, and to find people online. That's probably why you do need to literally create separate named identities in order for you to be able to keep those individual parts of yourself separate.
Yeah, and it doesn't even have to be something like, some, bedroom perverse thing. It could be something as simple as, like, finding out your coworker is Episcopalian and you're Catholic, or that, your coworker is an atheist and, or someone you thought you respected, turns out that they are pro-choice or something. Just something really small like that can set off a nerve in people, and they don't necessarily accept. Unfortunately, we don't live in a world where we accept everyone for exactly who they are. And people have stereotypes, and they have ideas and conceptions of right and wrong, morality, and little things like that will affect how you're viewed and create tension where there probably doesn't need to be tension, especially because it's not your coworkers or your boss's business, to know how you feel about a political issue. You know, it has nothing to do with your job, and it should stay out of your job probably. I mean, probably for the betterment of the workplace, you don't bring up politics, you don't bring up religion, and you don't bring up, sexuality. And that's been a hardcore rule for reasons, and that's because we don't all see eye to eye. And you can't expect everyone to be as liberal as a lot of people you see in the metaverse. They aren't. And you when you sort of say, hey, here's my Facebook account, and you go look and you see the groups that they're involved in and the stuff they post online, and it can really make you sort of like go, God, I mean, I thought this person was cool, but looks like they joined the unicorn group, and I'm a freaking leprechaun person, and fuck them. It's just you can see how tension would be created.
Unicorn people are bastards.
Just off of really small things, nuances that piss people off, and people get pissed off easily. So I think it's very important to separate work life and personal life online, and your real life identity. Keep that as much in the real life as possible, and you can create a pseudo identity, and that identity can be perfectly valid. It's something I've been trying to do for, I guess, what is it? I don't know how many years now I've been trying to make Alachia a valid identity, and I think for the most part, I feel like I am exactly who I say I am online. The Alachia me is definitely about probably even 110% more realistic than the Sally Smith version of me or whatever. So that's just it's just a name, it's a shell, it's a business thing, it's a financial thing, it's a technical thing. But who I am and who I represent myself in the real life, I pour all that into that identity, and that's very authentic, and you can make it very authentic. You don't have to be like, oh, this is my fake self, and this is my this is my fake life. And no, it can be a very clear representation of your real life self. You just use a different identity, so that all you're doing is you're uploading the core of your personality, your soul, as it were, your characteristic online, and allowing people to see that, and saying, the real name isn't that important. It's who you represent yourself as.
I mean, this is where there is potential danger, though, where the instead of doing what you've done and basically separated down the middle your real life, your business life, your family life, and your online life, but your online life is you. It just happens to be you online. It happens to be unfettered from the other things. Whereas the danger is when people will say to themselves, oh, okay, well, I'm going to create a new identity falsely. We're not talking about identity theft here or anything like that. I'm talking about somebody who will say to themselves, I want to be online, but I don't want to be me, because I personally think me sucks, or I'm not exciting, or this is their personal opinion, they're not interesting, whatever. What I will do is I will create an online personality that really does have personality, and I'll give them a good job, I'll give them some interesting stories and anecdotes. There'll be even people who will potentially change the sex of themselves online. Obviously that works when it's purely text, not so much when you're talking to people. But they will go out of their way to create a completely different, a false persona, and then go off into the metaverse as this individual. I think even if that's the extreme, obviously, but I think we've talked about this before, where even if it's not the extreme, even if somebody's not creating somebody from scratch and basically having hardly any of themselves in it, not even the kernel, there is a tendency to pick out the best bits, to cherry pick the interesting parts of your life, to be I'm trying to think of a good example. But say, for instance, you do a particular job, which 99% of it is boring and mundane, but every 1% you get to go to a conference. So when you talk to people, basically you mention all the conferences you went to. This fantastic conference, I went to this, I went to that, I went to that. You don't mention the fact that 90% of the job is office-based and you're boring and it's basically paperwork. You just focus on that 10%.
I mean, you're right. That definitely happens a lot. I mean, we're all probably guilty of doing it at some point or another, where we we may, and like say just even say an event, we can't, first off, we can't necessarily mention everything that happened. So we'll tend to exaggerate the highlights, because probably in your head it's exaggerated as well. And so you can say, if you're telling a story about something that happened, it's very easy to go, well, let me just add a little bit of flair to that and say the guy was 10 feet tall. He was really like 8 foot. It's just, it's little things like that you can do.
I was mugged by one guy, now it's 10 guys.
Yeah.
There's difference there, because that's the exaggeration side of things. That's where there's a kernel of truth, where something happened, there's an event happened, and you just shit up a bit. You add a bit of pizzazz. You give yourself a bigger role in an event than it potentially was. That happens in real life.
Yeah, that's true.
What happens on the meta, but there's also a personality that will create the event from scratch. They weren't even there.
There's no fact
all
check.
All of a sudden, they were a major part.
And there's no cross-reference. Yeah,
exactly. Exactly, because you've separated those lives. Whereas, of course, if you had never separated, somebody would go, somebody from your real life would say, hang on, really? You were at such a place, but, this is so the freedom that it gives you to be able to separate your lives, to split them down the middle and to keep them separate, to keep them in a small walled garden, is also a danger for a certain personality type that will, take advantage of the fact that they're not going to be checked or fact checked.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to see it at first, for sure, because genuinely you want to trust the people that you're interested in, and you want to believe everything that someone says, because that's the type of relationship we're all looking for, right? In terms of connection. And so, of course, everything you take, you see, and you take the things that people expose themselves as and say they are, and the experiences they have as fact. And it's not really until you see weird cross-references and fact-checking within their own storylines that don't really add up sometimes, and they seem like they're part of one group, but then you realize that they're probably not, and you just sort of like, you get to this point where you're just like, okay, that's enough. We don't need the best of you. You know what I mean? Like, and you don't have to be interested in everything I am too. That's like one of the other really annoying ones, is where it's like, oh yeah, me too. I'm totally also into baseball and stuff. Like I totally know who William Gibson is. I'm not gonna lie. I'm gonna tell you, no. I'm really not.
Cost you points.
I'm not interested. Sorry. I don't. Yeah, even if it cost me, was it 300 geek points or whatever?
Mm-hmm. You lost a ton that day.
Yeah, it's just like, well, I can see why people would fear that, because you don't want rejection. You don't want people to say like, oh well, Alachi's not interested in playing Final Fantasy, so she can't be part of this group, and she can't, we can't relate on that aspect, so the group will shun her from that. I mean, that's a very common fear, is that you'll be shunned from a group because you don't have the common interests. Whereas highlights of people's differences actually tends to make groups really strong, that people are very dynamic and different and not always interested in the same thing, where you have people who are like, hey, so are you really interested in, let's see, like, what, SpongeBob SquarePants or whatever, and people are like, yeah, dude, I totally love that thing, I watch it every single day. And then you'll have someone who comes along and is like, not really, it doesn't really interest me, and it sort of creates that sort of dynamic that I like, because then you have a wider range of conversation, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. I don't think it excludes people, but it can be dangerous that people feel like they need to have interest in everything, and they have to be involved with everything, and they have to have the same memories and the same line of thought. I think it's the differences and it's the contrast that actually makes interaction really, really interesting, and it's sort of like pushing that threshold of acceptance and flexibility within your own mind that makes certain connections grow better. And I don't know how you teach that. I don't know how you tell people, like, look, people are going to piss you off, and people are going to be different than you, and people are not going to agree with the things that you like and love, and the things you're so passionate about. People can be completely, absolutely indifferent to. And that should not deter you from of seeking certain connections that you can with the person. And so there's just no need. I feel like, it happens though. I mean, like, that's the problem. It's going to happen. What you see, like, especially, I would say Twitter and Facebook are probably really prime examples where people give you the highlights of who they are. And, the highlights of their characteristics and their personalities, and, like, they only mention, the really fantastic fun stuff about themselves, and not the mundane, boring stuff, which is, that's exactly what you would expect people to do. So it's what happens.
Mm. But what's weird is that I think you and I both share the same feeling that what one person finds mundane, another person finds interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's great to hear about exciting events and things that happened that were out of the ordinary, but also it's fascinating to just see people's day-to-day normal life, not the highlights, not even the lowlights, but just the middle ground, just see how they tick, because I think, I would say it's just you and I, but I think it's a very common thing. People like to see humanity. They like to see, as I say, how people tick, how their lives are different than potentially their own is, or how they deal with things that they've had to deal with. So as great as it is to say somebody, I just went to Mexico and I went cliff diving, you may want to know how they dealt with their car breaking down, which may not be an exciting thing, or how they dealt with their kid failing a thing in school, or all the day-to-day minutiae, which is actually the points, very many of the points that we connect at.
Yeah, that's the problem, is that people feel like we're all part of this entertainment environment where we're looking to be entertained. But sometimes we're just observing, or I'm observing anyways, and I like, the things I'm probably the most entertained with are the things that I feel are the most authentic. And the most authentic things are not always the things that are shockable or are exciting and completely unexpected. It's the really small, quiet moments of being a human being that I really appreciate, which is why I really love that 1 minute Flickr group we have, where you just sometimes it's like someone sitting at their computer with their cat on their lap, and how the little nuances of how they interact with their mouse or their keyboard, or how people engage in public and sort of, and not just people, but these are people I have relatively small connections with, but it's growing, and it's my way of seeing more of them, of who they really are, and really appreciating the beauty of, like, the small things that make up who they are. And I can't get over how fun it is just to know small little things about people. I mean, like, really tiny things that you would think that no one would be interested in, but I do, like the color of your shoelaces, or what color bedspread you have on your bed, or what does your sink look like right now, this instant. Because those things are very telling of what a person is, and it's not a judgmental thing. It's just sort of like an observation, like, oh, okay, I get it. Like, that's more or less like how you live your life, and how you live day to day, and I like those really tiny moments that define a person.
I know you've asked to see my kitchen several times.
Yeah,
refused,
I saw it. I saw a picture finally. No, yeah, I finally saw a picture after like a year begging.
You saw a picture. Look, so this is the thing. I mean, we're talking about how we're fascinated by the mundane. We spent ages talking about online grocery shopping and what was coming, and the guy who was delivering it, and the type of van that he was driving, and the fact that he was 90 years old and he had to schlep it all from the front door to the kitchen. And I remember us having a huge conversation about, unfortunately my toilet got blocked. We were talking about that. These things are not. These are not the highlights of our lives, but they're no less fascinating. They're no less fascinating to hear and listen to, and that. And I think it's a shame when people do feel the need to exaggerate and to over amplify and to big up their position in a particular event, because the fact of the matter is most people find the mundane equally as interesting, but equally as fascinating, and particularly if they start to sniff a rat and think to themselves, okay, fair enough, maybe, I don't think he did save all those people from the World Trade Center, but at the same time, somebody was there, or, do you see what I mean? There is this almost desire to perform, to be the best and stuff, and to be, to be more than you are. And the internet, certainly the metaverse, gives you that ability to do that. But I think it's personally, I think it's a bad track to go down.
Well, it just might be part of the personality, anyways, right? So that's the thing. Is like you can't suppress people's personality. I would just hope that they would know that probably exactly what you said. Who they are without all the pizzazz is probably way cooler than always being flashable or flashing or glittery, or more important than they really are. So
it certainly is interesting. The thing that we've both discussed at length is occasionally when we think to ourselves, we come across somebody who seems to be going down that route where they are over exaggerating and maybe adding several layers of gloss to their lives. It frustrates us because one thing that you want to do is find out the truth about something, and you. I think we both sat here going, if only we could just get a camera in there or dig a little deeper. I know that's sort of our voyeuristic nature, but just that, this constant desire to delve into the root of a person, to get through all the flim flam and the gloss and the exaggeration, the performance, just to get to the root of the individual.
Like, I think an example I mentioned in the last episode was that we do these 1 minute video projects where you just take a video of anything, anywhere, non-panned, non-edited, no music added, and you just 1 minute. And I mentioned how I noticed some stuff in the background of the video, one being this picture frame, and I didn't know what was in it. And he responded back and told me what was in it, where it was like, it was a gift from his older son for Father's Day. And it was a footprints poem, I'll read it out. It's, walk a little slower, Daddy, said a child so small. I'm following in your footsteps, and I don't want to fall. Sometimes your steps are very fast, sometimes they're hard to see, so walk a little slower, Daddy, for you're leading me. Someday when I'm all grown up, you're what I want to be, then I will have a little child who will want to follow me. And I would want to lead just right and know that I was true, so walk a little slower, Daddy, for I must follow you. And I was just like so thrilled when I read that, and just to know like there's these little nuances that you can pick up about little things that, and I know it's a Father's Day poem, and it's what it probably was even maybe picked out by the wife. You never know, but it's it was a gift from his son, and that's a moment he must have had, and you can almost feel that, and that's a tiny little moment you got from just 1 minute of watching him work on his desk. And it's just,
and that's what's so exciting, isn't it? Is that he pointed his camera at his desk. He didn't take any note of what was around in the surroundings. He just wanted to show you that there was a minute where he was working away at the PC. To him, he has that poem on his wall, or he has it next to his desk, or he has items on his desk, which to him are mundane. Obviously that particular item was probably very cherished to his heart, and so on and so forth. To you as a viewer, to you as somebody looking from the outside, all of that's fascinating. How fascinating is, oh my goodness, he has this pen, or he has this on his desk, or he uses this mouse mat, or and then you pick up on something which is incredibly fascinating, which is that poem, and as you say, just shows a spark of existence that you could then discuss. He told you what that item was, and you were able to actually read, which was a fantastic poem. I mean, how amazing! But somebody looking at that picture may say, very mundane.
Yeah, what's
Very
happening?
cool.
It's it's not a YouTube video, so they're like expecting something to happen within that minute. But it's just, no, it's him just
So it's
working.
supposed to collapse.
Yeah.
So it's supposed to blow up. Or, so it's supposed to come crashing through the window.
Yeah, where's the Mentos and the Coke? What's going on here? But yeah, I think it's and it's very valid to share small pieces like of that with online, and those are the pieces, those are the steps that I think that make up your identity in the metaverse, that create character and really round out who you represent yourself online. If that's what you choose to do, if you're looking to put yourself online and really sort of upload your characteristic or your character to interact with other people. It's small little things like that and it's all about your comfort level as well. Don't expect people to want to share their most deepest inner thoughts with the entire metaverse as soon as they come online. You create an identity. My first suggestion is, one, make it different from your real life. It's just so you have a little bit more flexibility. And the second is to not be afraid to create different branches if you need to keep expressing yourself, and you will be able to share that with someone eventually one day. No doubt, and the genuineness of it is what's gonna really connect with someone, I think, and especially someone who you feel you're comfortable enough to expose that part of you with. And then there is a joy of an anonymity as well. You get to be unhindered in your expression, and that is something that you don't always have in the real world at all, or in the meatverse. Where you have to limit your expression, where online I feel like limiting expression is limiting data. And data is very important to me online because I think a lot of people live their whole lives, with so much data that is valuable to the world, to humanity, and it stays in their brain and then it's completely erased. I guess I want to give an example, would be like saying people who have, say, let's see, what's a good one? I don't want to. The problem is, I hate to give examples because I don't want to offend anybody, but let's say, for example, you have an eating disorder, and you live your whole life with this eating disorder, and you're completely quiet about it, and it's a sort of silent suffering you have. Well, because that data dies with you long after you're gone, it's gone. It was in your head. That data cannot be, accessed anymore once you're dead. If you put your data online, that can be used for the whole of humanity. How a person who has an eating disorder thinks, how they function, what are their thought processes, and that can be used not only just as support for other people who may have the same issues as you, and make them to make them realize that they may have the same problems as you do, and that you could where you solve the problem, they can find an easy solution too. It's like Googling life, right? And that once that data is online, it's always online. Well, for the most part, it's always online, and it will always forever be part of the human database, and it will not have dissolved with the death of a person. And I think that's, a lot of people say that's very morbid, but to me I think that's very hopeful and optimistic about the human capacity for the way we think. It's so dynamic. We have so many expressions, we have so many thoughts, we have so many ideas, and largely, until we had the World Wide Web, it was all completely locked in basements, in closets. And it wasn't until we had a method of uploading all this database, all this data from our heads and our experiences online, that we've become to realize how connected we actually are, and how dynamic humans really are, and how we have so much of a capacity to be so many things at one time. And it's sort of like layering out the brain, and it's just too complex to even talk about right now. But here you have a piece of someone online, and you have no connection with them in the real world, and just through sheer access of data, you can connect to another human being. That's so powerful.
Do you know what the Kinsey report was?
That's the one where they did the personality test?
No, it was where basically it was a massive census about sexual preference and the sex act, and what people did, and just basically it was a huge guy. This guy just basically wanted to know all the ins and outs, literally, about America, about the American sexual life. And one of the amazing things about it was the vast amount of people who thought that the way they were was abnormal, that the things they were doing or thinking or expressing behind closed doors was wrong, or that they were the only ones that had these thoughts. Obviously the Kinsey report was done many years back, and so there was still a bit of a buttoned down nature about things like this, but it just exposed the idea that as human beings, without the possibility to see how other human beings react and behave and carry on in the privacy of their own home or in the privacy of their own mind, we find it very hard to associate our own thoughts and views. There are some people that believe that whatever they think is what everybody else thinks, but the vast majority of people don't do that. They think that they're somehow different. The internet has made that hugely, vastly greater. As you say, the fact that somebody who, say, for instance, has an eating disorder is able to then go to an area where people have discussed similar eating disorders and the way they cope and the way they feel and the way they behave on a day-to-day basis is not only cathartic for the person who's given that information via the internet, via the meta, but also very useful to the person who's then going through the same things. And we also talked about, before the show, about how people would keep private diaries. They would write down things. They would almost, it was almost like a stress relief valve, that you could come, you could have something going on in your life, but because you could write it down, you could almost get it out of your system, get it onto the paper, and somehow alleviate some of the internal stress and struggle that these things were causing. Again, the internet, the fact that you're able to, for various degrees of anonymity that we've already discussed, put all that out there, even if not necessarily in that situation for people to read and comment upon, but just for your own personal cathartic release, that you can get it out there somewhere, your thoughts. I think these sites such as is it FML? There's various different sites that give you a level of anonymity where you're able just to put down a sentence or a paragraph or something you've done or feel like doing, or some feelings that you have. Though psychologically, that is a huge step, I think. And it's one of the areas of the internet which is sometimes underlooked.
Well, I mean, and that's the beauty of that kind of uploading and sharing. But at the same time, there's the ugly. I mean, there's groups out there that get together to harm and to spread hate and to be hateful. But I still think that's just as important to get out there, to be online, so that people can see that this exists. There's a whole group of people in the South, in Texas, who believe that racism has been eradicated, that don't believe it exists anymore. And the kind of tragically beautiful thing about the internet is that it exposes the reality of humanity online, or to the world, and you can see right away that there are still people who have a lot of hatred and who have a lot of feelings of ill will towards other people because of certain things, and at least you can look at it. And as much as I hate groups and I absolutely hate people who have intentions to harm other people, I think it's still very powerful and very useful to have that knowledge that those people think that way, and then you can start to look, why did they think that way? What are these conditions that are creating people to interact in certain ways, and what is the actual reality behind why we have conflicts in the world as well? I mean, that's all data that can be used, and even though it's not pretty and it's not wrapped up in a bow and it's not glittery and it's not sparkly and it's not happy, it's still useful, I think, and I think that I still see a very valuable portion of having the totality of humanity online, even if it's not tied to a particular identity. At least we're seeing kind of like a global truth.
Yeah, you're quite right. I think also what happens as well is that, particularly say for instance where you're talking about a group of people that have a strong racist attitude or bigoted attitude, the way these things fester and are carried forward is because these groups are very insular, and they're not being challenged all the time. One thing the internet has done is, once these people who are then discussing their views online are then constantly being challenged. This unfortunately is the way that comments and so on can work, and this is not necessarily a constructive argument necessarily goes on. I'm sure, in fact, far from it sometimes. But the fact that an individual, for instance, there was a group on the Usenet Talk groups, one of the Usenet Talk groups, which was talking about historical revisionism or Holocaust denial, which was, the group was basically about showing all the different fake ideas about why the Holocaust didn't happen, that it was made up, that it was somehow a publicity stunt in order to ensure that the Jewish people could get Israel. The group initially would start off with the idea of these people who had this belief having a conversation between themselves, but it soon became a discussion area, sometimes quite a violent discussion area, unfortunately, but where these weird, outdated views to many people were challenged, and I have no examples of people who said, "Oh, okay, well, I start to see that this is not potentially the truth. That there's other ways to think." The fact is that can never. These things. What's amazing about this, and what keeps this, my passion and your passion, I'm sure everybody else's passion for the internet. If this could not have happened before, that without this global place that people can meet up and connect, these sort of things could not happen. The physical logistics of a group of Holocaust deniers coming up against a group of Zionists, it would not be possible in reality, in real life. So it's just not. That's why I find the whole thing fascinating. We started off talking about identity and so on and so forth, but one thing that is key from all these discussions that we have is this is just such a fascinating time of these tools and this universe that is being created is just such a melting pot and such a diversity and such a community that it gives me goosebumps.
Well, it's a good reality for people to understand, especially new people coming in and trying to figure out their place in the metaverse and how to best represent themselves is to kind of know that reality, that it's not all kumbaya, we're not all happy, we're not all a good community. I'll even say, even within the WoW podcasting community or the WoW community itself, you have people who hate each other, left and right, and don't agree with each other, don't see eye to eye, but we all still exist, and the thing is that I still think it's very important to encourage people and inspire people to try to be as much of themselves as necessary, or as they feel like it. If anything comes to mind, if you feel like writing a blog post, if you feel like writing a song or a poem, or doing a podcast, don't be afraid to create it. Don't be afraid to create a piece of yourself online and leave a digital footprint. And even if no one listens to it or if someone hates it, and I heard a horror story just recently about how people are made to hate people will hate who you are. Someone is going to hate who you are. Even something as wonderful and beautiful as like volunteering to help after school children or whatever. People will actually find a reason to hate you for that, or going to a soup kitchen and volunteering. There's just like, someone will come along and be like, no, you have to let those people suffer and learn on their own. You can't handhold them, and they'll make you feel really bad for being a really good person, because they just don't see eye to eye with you, and it might be very discouraging. But to me, I say, if you need to, you create separate identities to do what you want to say, or say what you want to say and be who you want to be, because that's part of letting people understand the whole picture of the human condition. And I would hate for people to get discouraged because they want to be honest, or they don't think people are paying attention, because that data, the beauty, like you said, the beauty of the metaverse is that data is there, and that all adds to everything, and even though you have ugliness, it can be countered with beauty, and if you have unrealistic beauty, it can be countered with truth. And I think that that the more honest we are online, no matter what means we need to do to be honest is good, because there's nothing worse than people hating who they are because they don't feel like they have a place on this earth, where in fact if you look online you can find almost any place, you'll find something or somewhere, someone who will connect with you on a certain level. And if we keep sheltering ourselves, we keep saying, oh, I'm only going to expose the exciting or the brilliant portion of me or the intelligent portion of me, then the people don't see the part where you're just, here's another human being who has a really hard time with dealing with certain things in life, or someone who doesn't quite get something where, I don't understand the furry community. Can you explain it to me? Help people sort of come to terms with things that they may not just be exposed to. And I think that, say, the gay rights movement has benefited a ton from internet involvement and sort of creating communities where there were no communities before, and getting information out there that there wasn't before, and educating the public and everyone as to look, here I am, this person you really connect with, you really like, and yeah, I'm gay, or yeah, I'm atheist, or yeah, I'm Catholic. And it's just sort of seeing, all the bits and pieces of a person that you may connect with, and then discovering that, a lot of boundaries that you thought you wouldn't be able to get over because someone has a certain belief system, or, you don't see eye to eye with their sexual preference or the things that they like to do behind closed doors, doesn't really altogether matter sometimes.
Yeah, it certainly has the ability to break down barriers and to, again, like I say, it's just how physically impossible that would be. You could have the most esoteric interest, the most, that would be considered so niche that the chance of you running into anybody within your own physical reality that shares those same interests or views or whatever would be so remote that you would spend your entire life feeling lost and unconnected and, somehow
in the real world,
still useless. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Whereas now, chances are it may even be a dozen people. Those dozen people are spread across the various continents. They've gone onto the internet to try and find like-minded people, and then all of a sudden you're in a community which understands the particular interest that you have. It is truly amazing on so many different levels. I've forgotten completely what I was going to say.
Well, it's even the small things too. Super minor things. I think today we were talking about Oreo cookies, and just something small like Oreo cookies, and talking about what cookies we like. That's a connection. It's so insignificant, yet as a person it makes you feel connected, and I think that's the beauty, or the added beauty of these types of connections, because we've lost, especially in America, we've lost the sense of community. We've become a car culture, and so we don't interact with people on a normal, day-to-day basis. It's kind of difficult, where we've lost that sense of belonging, especially as you exit school and you enter the workforce. You have to, you're expected to behave a certain way and to present a certain persona. And you don't have these groupings that you can have where you feel like, oh, well, I belong to a community. And I think that it's all translating on, I think that's what people are searching for when they come online a lot, is to find a place where they belong, find a community that they can feel at home with and connect. Because I wonder a lot whether or not in the real world, as we teach socialization in school and among parents and everything like that, that we don't emphasize it anymore. And I think people have that sense of longing for it again, and just as because humans are social creatures, and we want to, we don't want to feel singular or solo in this world, and we want to feel like we belong. And it's difficult to do that where it takes 20 minutes to get from one person to another. Whereas online, I can connect with anyone across the world, and the odds of me connecting with someone across the world is probably going to be higher. The probability of me meeting someone I have more in common with is higher than me going out to, say, a bar on 6th Street.
Yeah, very much higher. I was going to say there's an advert which is currently running on BBC. The BBC have a thing called their internet season at the moment, and there's an advert which shows like an ethereal figure sort of walking through the earth, as if it's like an alien figure saying something along the lines of, you know, we're coming here, we want to show you how you can live and not fight each other, and how you can cure disease by all working together, and how you can solve world hunger. And you kind of think, oh, it's like an alien, but then the tagline at the end is saying like, we are the internet, because in fact what I'll do is I will do a link to the actual advert. I've got a copy of it in the show notes for people to look at, because it's actually fascinating and very interesting, and kind of amplifies what we've been saying in this particular discussion.
That's, yeah, and I'm interested in seeing that. But that's I don't know. I wonder if maybe people don't understand the tools that they have available to, and how easy it is to, and fluid it can be to create identities as you need to, and to filter out certain aspects of yourself to certain people, and that's not a bad thing at all. And in fact, it's kind of funny, because about 2 years ago, someone had, I guess I could go ahead and say, I don't think he's going to mind. Jemima's found a lot of my identities, and he cross-referenced them, and he linked them, and he put them on this like graphic, and he twisted all the arrows going from one identity to another, and he titled it Meta Fail, right? Or it's like Meta Connection Fail or whatever. But it was funny, because about 6 months later, he ran into this issue where he was trying to be more online, I suppose, and his private sort of life, where he'd like to discuss geek stuff and you know, the Guild and WoW and Arma 2 and gaming stuff, he didn't want that to interfere with the life he had with his sysadmin group, where it was all business and technical, and they exchanged, you know, technical know-hows, and you didn't want that messed up with, you know, like lol cats and stuff like that. You know, he didn't want that to integrate and mix that, and so he had to create a separate identity. And I remember laughing at him, going like, yeah, you see, like, I'm not crazy. Sometimes it just doesn't work out, where you can't, just the sheer noise you have online, because you can upload your data so freely, the sheer noise you can do, or you can have when you're sharing, can be very distracting when you're trying to connect with a certain group of people, where, you know, they're not going to be interested in the fact that, you know, you like food porn or you like cupcakes, you know. No, they want to know what freaking operating system you like best. You know, it's a different community, it's a different crowd, and you have to know what it is that those people are seeking to enhance the connection better. And sometimes being completely transparent is not going to enhance that connection. It's going to be, let's get direct data transfer here and exchange ideas based off of certain topics which we want to discuss, and stay on topic, because there's nothing worse than wanting to have something very specific in mind to discuss, and someone just floating all over the place. That tends to be a sort of a, what do you call it, a sinkhole, you know, in connection. But, you know, there's things like,
I remember Jemima was doing that, and he was he was actually looking for a new job, wasn't he? So he wanted to give that information to potential employers, and he wanted to keep all the stuff he did, all the technical knowledge that he had, separate from all the stuff that perhaps the employer would see as a waste of time.
Right. And, you know, there's methods, like, you know, I found with, you know, Firefox and Chrome, they allow you to have multiple profiles you can use. So if you wanted to keep track, and I keep track of, like, I have my own notebook where I keep track of the emails I use and the blogs I use and the logins and passwords. And it's just sort of like a system. You can have email forwarding, which is really great. And you can have, you know, email identities that you create and have it all forward to one address, etc. And, you know, you can have, you know, there's blogs that allow you to have privacy settings, and Flickr allows you to have privacy settings. And I think it may be a little, you know, people are like, oh, it's just too complicated. It's really not. It's just a few little extra steps to allow you to have more freedom of expression and acceptance per group or per connection, that I think really will enhance you and make you feel a little bit more freer to be who you are in totality online, that's supposed to be the beauty of what the meta is just to be yourself in totality. And although you can't be yourself to everybody, I mean, you can still be yourself to the meta.
Mm. Yes, I think that's a good line to end on. You can still be yourself to the meta.
All right, so let's see. You can find us on Twitter at Alachia, and Jeppy is at LJeppy, and we're at Metatalks.com, and you can email us at podcast@metatalks.com, and we're in the Buying Point channel, and we've had a couple people join in, which is really great, and we'll put the necessary
It's been
links.
good, isn't it? We've seen a bit of new blood coming in.
Yeah, it's been fun, and I guess I should say that too. It's really cool. You know, we had this person in Buying Point is really literary. You know, she's an English major, and she's just so, into writing novels, short stories, poetry. And this guy came in, and he was like talking about how he loves to write short stories, and he's going to do this sonnet project. And I was like, oh my God, finally she has sort of a literary sparring partner. And it was just so fun to see that connection right away, where they were able to discuss, pandemic, whatever it's called, where, the technicalities of poetry writing, and etc. And I was just like, I was so, I don't know, I was just so tickled to death to see that kind of connection, and that was fun.
You were like a proud mother, weren't you?
No. Oh, God. All right. And so the closing song today is, we're going to close out with Alexander Blue, and the song is called Emptiness. And it was a song I used a lot, I think, in the backgrounds of my Wildcast track, and emotionally it means a lot to me, because it kind of represents the sort of blank space for me of the meta, and how it sort of fills in. But that's just my own interpretation. But I'll put the website is www.alexanderblue.com, but I'll put that all in the show notes. So until next time, see you guys on the flip side.
Bye.